If you are very smart and still not getting rich, the problem is probably not your intelligence. The problem is where your intelligence has been deployed. That is a much harder sentence to accept than the usual motivational nonsense. But I have lived long enough to know that uncomfortable truths are often the only ones worth carrying around. People grow up hearing a simple equation: smart means successful, good grades mean good income, precision means superiority. Analytical people are supposed to rise naturally because the world should reward the people who understand things best. Then life begins. And what do you see? You see brilliant engineers with little net worth. You see PhDs living on prestige and debt. You see mediocre business owners building real balance sheets. You see average salespeople with ordinary minds but extraordinary cash flow. You see competent operators who would never impress a classroom building asset stacks quietly, while the smartest person in the room is still waiting for the system to notice how right he has been for 15 years. That is not an accident. That is a trap. I call it the accuracy trap. The accuracy trap is what happens when a person with real intelligence spends most of life becoming increasingly excellent at being correct inside systems they do not own. The system praises them for it. Teachers praise them. Professors praise them. Employers praise them. Titles arrive. Credentials arrive. Status arrives. But the actual financial structure beneath their life does not change the way they thought it would. They become more admired than free, more employable than wealthy, more precise than powerful. That is the trap. And once you see it, a great many things that look confusing stop being confusing at all. You stop asking why the smartest people are not automatically the richest. You start asking a better question. What kind of intelligence does wealth actually reward? That is the mother line of this story. The world does not mainly reward intelligence in the abstract. It rewards intelligence that can tolerate uncertainty long enough to acquire leverage. That is a completely different thing. From childhood, smart people are usually trained in one very particular direction. They are trained to recognize patterns inside rules. They are rewarded for answering correctly inside frameworks designed by other people. They learn to memorize, interpret, optimize, and perform under institutional evaluation. They are told implicitly and explicitly that their ability to be right will protect them. Inside school, that is often true. Inside wealth creation, it is much less true than people imagine. School rewards accuracy, compliance, memory, and performance under controlled conditions. Wealth creation rewards action under ambiguity, tolerance for imperfect information, persuasion under uncertainty, and the ability to attach yourself to ownership rather than merely improve a process. Those are different skill sets. The smartest child in a classroom is usually the one who can solve the teacher's problem. The future wealth builder is often the person who eventually learns to ask a much colder question, who owns the upside of this problem being solved. That is the line. A smart student often learns to love correctness. A wealth builder learns to love position. Correctness is satisfying, position pays. That is one of the cruelest little facts in all of finance. If your identity becomes wrapped around being right, being rigorous, being the one who sees flaws first, being the one who can explain why something might fail, then you enter adult life carrying a set of habits that institutions adore and markets frequently punish. You hesitate longer. You analyze more deeply. You need more evidence. You want the model complete before the move is made. You want the product cleaner before the launch. You want the forecast clearer before the commitment. You want the strategy to feel intellectually complete before your reputation gets attached to it. Meanwhile, a less elegant person has already launched, failed, adjusted, launched again, closed 2 clients, bought 1 ugly cash-flowing business, raised prices, made a mistake, survived it, and built equity while you were still refining the theory. That is the first mechanism inside the accuracy trap. I call it the correctness addiction. Correctness addiction is when a smart person's sense of self becomes tied to not looking foolish. He wants to understand every variable first. He wants the map before he moves. He wants certainty, or at least the respectable appearance of certainty. That feels like prudence. Sometimes it is, but very often it is fear wearing a tuxedo. Markets do not pay you for being the last careful man to agree. They pay you for being early enough and right enough while uncertainty still exists. That is the part the highly intelligent often hate, because it means the game is not mainly about perfect information. It is about asymmetry. It is about acting when your expected upside is high enough relative to your downside, even if many unknowns remain unresolved. That is emotionally offensive to people trained by institutions. Institutions reward complete work. Markets reward incomplete but timely positioning. Now, let me tell you the second mechanism, the employability trap. This one captures many of the smartest people almost gently, because smart people are useful, and because they are useful. Institutions want them close. They solve problems. They increase efficiency. They reduce error. They design systems. They improve models. They save time for executives. They calm complexity. In short, they make other people's machines work better. Institutions are willing to pay for that. But there is a catch. Institutions are almost never paying them uncapped upside. They are paying them salary, bonus, prestige, promotion, maybe stock grants, if the culture is good enough, but still within a hierarchy that keeps ownership concentrated above them. The smart employee becomes indispensable to a machine he does not own. He improves the system's output. He raises the machine's value. He becomes better compensated than average. Then he mistakes that usefulness for wealth. Building that is the trap. Being highly employable is not the same as being financially powerful. It is actually one of the most seductive substitutes for financial power, because it feels stable, respectable, and deserved. You keep getting rewarded. And because you keep getting rewarded, you keep believing you are on the correct road. Promotions look like progress. Performance reviews feel like confirmation. A better title feels like evidence that the system is rational. But salary, even a very good salary, is still constrained by budgets, hierarchy, and your continued presence. The upper ceiling moves, but the ceiling is still there. Ownership is different. Ownership scales while you are absent. A business can sell without you speaking. A product can distribute without you attending the meeting. A property can appreciate without you solving a problem that day. Equity can compound while you sleep. That is why a modest owner can eventually outrun an excellent employee. The employee may be smarter, the owner may be rougher, less articulate, less analytical, less elegant, less intellectually impressive. But the owner is attached to the right side of the equation. One is optimizing the machine, the other is attached to the machine's upside. That is what compounds. I have seen too many brilliant people become rich in symbolic capital and poor in actual leverage. They are admired, cited, respected, introduced properly at dinner, and privately dependent on a payroll that could disappear in a reorganization. That is not freedom. That is decorated dependence. The third mechanism is the risk resolution gap. Smart people can see more downside. That is a real gift. It is also, unmanaged, a real curse. A highly analytical mind can generate an astonishing number of reasons not to move. Regulatory risk, timing risk, cash flow risk, legal risk, competitor reaction, margin compression, opportunity cost, reputational damage, technical fragility, consumer behavior, uncertainty, macro instability, execution mistakes, key man risk, policy shifts, liquidity risk. Most ventures do in fact have many possible failure points. The smart person sees them. The average person often does not see them at the same resolution. That ignorance is not inherently noble. It can be expensive. But sometimes it gives the average person something the intelligent person lacks. Motion. He acts before the risk list has finished breeding. He is not braver in the heroic sense. He is less cognitively burdened. That matters far more than people admit, because wealth is not built only by avoiding bad decisions. It is also built by being willing to make incomplete decisions and then adapt faster than reality punishes you. A person who sees 15 risk pathways and freezes loses to the person who sees 5, acts, gets punched twice, learns, pivots, and acquires something. That is how the less impressive often outrun the impressive. The smart person wants resolved uncertainty. The builder wants survivable uncertainty. Those are not the same preference. One is optimized for being right. The other is optimized for getting through. And in markets, getting through often outranks being elegant. I call this the resolution addiction, the desire to resolve every important variable before acting. That addiction is expensive. The world of ownership, building, sales, acquisition, investing, and leverage does not grant full resolution before opportunity moves. By the time the data is perfect, the asymmetry is usually gone. The trade is crowded. The business is expensive. The property has repriced. The trend is obvious. The room is full. The easy multiple is gone. The risk has fallen. Yes, but so has the reward. That is the fourth mechanism, the social leverage gap. Wealth is far more social than intelligent people like to admit. People who score well on institutional intelligence often undervalue persuasion, networking, narrative control, emotional tone, confidence projection, and relationship building because those things feel soft, imprecise, maybe even vaguely dirty. They would prefer a world where truth wins cleanly on its own and where competence is self-evident enough to need no selling. That world does not exist. Capital flows through trust, perception, and narrative. A mediocre operator who can make people comfortable will often gain access to money a brilliant but rigid analyst never touches. A decent entrepreneur who can sell a vision and build loyalty may raise capital, close deals, recruit partners, and find customers, while a smarter person is still perfecting the deck or privately resenting the superficiality of it all. This is why average people with social range often build wealth faster than intellectually superior people with social contempt. The first person understands that money moves through people. The second person understands concepts. Concepts matter. People decide where capital goes. That is why negotiation is not decoration. Storytelling is not fluff relationship. Building is not optional. These are ownership skills. They are not academic skills. And when the intelligent dismiss them, they do not become purer. They become poorer. The wealthy are not always the deepest thinkers in the room. They are often the best positioned in the relationship web through which opportunities circulate. This offends the intellect because the intellect wants clean merit. Markets do not care. The fifth mechanism is prestige substitution. A very smart person is often offered a shiny trade early in life. Trade your upside for recognition. Trade equity for title. Trade ownership for prestige. Trade cash flow for the emotional warmth of being considered impressive by people who already think in institutional categories. This happens in academia, law, medicine, engineering, finance, consulting, research, even parts of art. The person pursues a path full of honorable difficulty. Years of study, certifications, elite admission, professional respect. The work may be meaningful. I do not mock that. But the prestige itself begins to act like a narcotic. It gives the intelligent person enough validation to stop asking harsher wealth questions. Am I owning anything? Is my upside capped? If I stop working, what still pays me? Am I accumulating admiration or assets? That last question is deadly. Admiration and assets do not compound on the same curve. Society flatters people into believing prestige is adjacent to prosperity. Sometimes it is. Often it is not. The professor may be brilliant, poor. The business owner may be ordinary and balanced, sheet rich. The surgeon may be deeply respected and still fundamentally trapped inside labor. The mediocre franchisor may lack refinement and yet own a structure that keeps producing. That is why I say smart people often get paid in applause first and wealth later, if ever. Average builders often skip the applause and go directly for the structure. That is not because they are spiritually better. They are just playing a different game. The sixth mechanism is ambiguity and tolerance. This one sits even deeper than fear. Many intelligent people were trained in environments where there was always some kind of grading rubric, a syllabus, a benchmark, an authority, a right answer, a recognized path. Even rebellion occurred inside known boundaries. You could still tell whether you were performing well. Wealth creation rarely offers that comfort. There is no professor telling you your pricing model is good enough. No midterm proving your tiny business has the right economics. No dean certifying that your risky acquisition was rational. No exam to confirm that now is the correct moment to go from labor into ownership. There is only the market. And the market is late, inconsistent, emotional, cruel, and often unwilling to tell you clearly whether you are brilliant or delusional until after it has already inflicted damage or offered reward. Average builders often tolerate this better because they were never spiritually attached to being graded well. Smart people, especially those who built identity around being the excellent one, often experience ambiguity as threat. No signal means no validation. No validation means move back toward the institution, back toward the job, back toward the known role, back toward the safe structure that once rewarded them for intelligence in recognizable ways. That is how whole decades disappear, not through catastrophe, through repeated returns to environments that feel clear. The market does not reward clarity. It rewards positioning. That is the seventh mechanism, the linear income illusion. Smart professionals often earn enough to feel as though wealth is coming, yet not enough to truly change the game. A raise arrives, another later, a bonus, a better title, some RSs, more status, better office, better apartment, slightly nicer life, more optionality perhaps, but still not actual escape velocity. This is how the linear income illusion works. It creates just enough movement to keep the intelligent committed to the salary path, while ownership compounds somewhere else. A person sees progress in annual increments, while an owner sees jumps. If I own 10% of a thing that doubles, my wealth can leap. If I work 20% harder and get a 7% raise after tax, my life changes far less dramatically. This is why I tell people not to confuse income growth with wealth acceleration. They are related, but they are not the same. A large salary can be powerful only if it is treated as a tool for acquiring leverage, equity, and optionality. If it is treated as proof that the salary path itself will lead to freedom, the professional may wake up wealthy, looking, and structurally trapped. That is a dark but common outcome. The eighth mechanism is overspecialization. The intelligent often narrow. They differentiate themselves through depth, technical depth, analytical depth, research depth, domain depth that can be useful, but the market frequently rewards synthesis more than pure depth. The person who understands a little finance, a little psychology, a little distribution, a little narrative, a little technology, and a little sales can build, acquire, or scale faster than a world-class narrow expert who cannot translate his brilliance into something people can buy. Wealth often flows to connectors, not because depth is worthless, because value has to travel, a product must be sold, a service must be priced, a team must be recruited, a deal must be negotiated, a market must be chosen, an opportunity must be communicated. Breadth carries wealth farther than depth alone in many commercial settings. The intelligent person who mistakes specialization for superiority can build a very refined prison. People need him, respect him, depend on him. They may even pay him well, but he remains in service to systems that know how to capture his narrow value without granting him real participation in the upside. That is another reason smart people stay poor while average people get rich. The average person may understand fewer things. He may understand the one thing that matters most, how to turn effort into claims. Now let me give you the identity flip that matters, because this is the point where the whole story should become useful instead of merely diagnostic. Most intelligent people were trained to ask one question: how do I become more correct? That is not a stupid question. It is just incomplete for the wealth game. The richer question is this: how do I become more leveraged? That changes everything. The correct employee solves better problems. The leveraged owner controls the upside of solved problems. The correct analyst produces superior insight. The leveraged allocator owns the stream that benefits from the insight. The correct academic writes the better paper. The leveraged operator buys, builds, or distributes the thing that scales. This is not anti-intellectual. It is anti-waste. If you are smart, Your intelligence is too valuable to spend your whole life making someone else's machine more elegant, while your own net worth remains dependent on next quarter's payroll. That is the blunt truth. So what is the answer? Not becoming dumber, not romanticizing mediocrity, not pretending average is superior. The answer is redeployment. Redeploy intelligence away from validation and toward leverage. Study ownership with the seriousness you once applied to exams. Study cash flow the way you studied abstract systems. Study negotiation, pricing, positioning, distribution, and capital allocation. Detach your identity from being the person who always has the best model and attach it to being the person with the best asymmetry. Learn to tolerate looking temporarily unimpressive while building assets quietly. Accept that some average people get rich, not because they are more deserving, but because they moved earlier, sold harder, owned sooner, and cared less about looking brilliant while doing it. This is where the smart person must become emotionally stronger, not just cognitively stronger. You must survive being less admired while becoming more strategic. That is a hard transition. The intelligent often prefer environments where their superiority is visible. Wealth creation may require years in environments where superiority is not visible at all. You may earn less at first, you may look less prestigious, your peers may seem ahead, your parents may worry, your professors may disapprove, your old classmates may not understand why the person with the highest test scores is suddenly obsessed with a small business, a niche service, a strange acquisition, a plane rental, a software tool, a licensing model, a boring trade, or a capital stack. Let them misunderstand it. You are changing games. That is the whole point. If I were giving a protocol to a very smart young person who feels financially stuck, I would tell him 5 things. Stop treating employability as the final form of success. Treat it as fuel. A good salary can buy time, margin, and seed capital. Do not let it buy your identity. Second, begin owning something, anything productive, earlier than feels comfortable. Ownership teaches realities theory never can. Third, force yourself into social leverage, even if it feels inelegant. Be seen. Capital moves through people. Fourth, practice taking bounded risks before life forces you into giant ones. Start small. Learn the feel of uncertainty. Build a tolerance for imperfect action. Fifth, ask of every major effort, does this make me more admirable or more leveraged? Sometimes the two align. Often they do not. That last question can save a decade. I also want to say something that intelligent people need to hear more often. Your ability to see downside is not your enemy. It is a gift, but if you let it stop at caution, the gift turns into self-sabotage. It must be paired with design. Use your mind not just to imagine failure, but to structure around it buffers, reserves, downside limits. Phased bets, better terms, small tests, pilot projects, protective clauses, multiple paths. Smart people often stop at the first half of the process. They identify risk and then retreat. The better move is to identify risk and then re-engineer the move until the downside is survivable. That is where intelligence becomes wealth power. Not in saying no more elegantly, in saying yes under better conditions. That is the difference between the intelligent spectator and the intelligent allocator. So here is the final question I would leave you with. Is your intelligence being used to make you more impressive inside systems you do not own? Or is it being used to build ownership, leverage, optionality, and claims that will keep paying long after your effort leaves the room? That is the real divide. Not smart versus average, accuracy versus leverage, admiration versus equity, safety versus asymmetry. The tragedy is not that smart. People cannot get rich. The tragedy is that many of them are rewarded so nicely by the wrong game that they stay in it until the best compounding years are behind them. Do not let that be your story. If you are smart, do not spend the next 10 years becoming a more polished servant of structures you do not own. Use your intelligence to build something with an upside that belongs to you. That is when intelligence finally stops being a classroom advantage and starts becoming wealth.